Okay. Hi, Anthony. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You were the police commissioner in New York City. Was this back in the 90s?
Yeah, no, not New York City, Westchester County in
Oh,
Rye.
okay. All right.
Yeah, I was corrections commissioner in New York City.
Oh, okay. And this was under Giuliani at the time that you were there?
Yes,
The TV show The Commish, which I sort of vaguely remember, that was sort of based off of your life, yeah?
yes.
And it says that you wrote a couple of episodes for that?
Yeah, I became a member of the Screenwriters Guild, and I started by telling stories because so many stories happened to me. So they thought I would be good to write some myself, and they gave me a writer to help me, and I learned a new skill.
Did you move to Florida? Is that where you are now?
Yes, yeah, I'm in Florida now,
Okay.
about
Did
20 years.
did you retire?
Well, yeah, I retired, but when I moved down to Florida, they did a story about me, and Governor Bush saw it and offered me the post of secretary of the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, which is the largest juvenile justice program in the country. So I went up to Tallahassee, and I worked for him for about 2.5 years. We did some marvelous things up there. We reduced juvenile crime 17.5%.
How did you do that, if I might ask?
Well, we had 164 diversion programs. I had 1,400 probation officers, that's juvenile probation officers, and 26 detention centers. And we measured everything we did. I had 15 PhDs work for me and 20 lawyers. So we measured everything we did, which took us to what works. If things didn't work, we got rid of them. We had a female program. The recidivism rate was like 84%, so I closed it down. It was worse than if we had done anything. So we looked and measured what we did, and if it didn't work, because we measured it so well, we closed it and went on to something else. You got to remember, in government, the strongest force in government is inertia, trying to get government to move, change. And the battle cry today is change. And when you try to, and I've been trying to manage change as long as I've been in government. And when you try to manage change, you run into my wife's roast beef. When we got married, my wife used to cut off the ends of the roast beef. I said, "What do you do that for?" She says, "Well, it gets brown on top, the juice comes out. That's the way my mother cooked roast beef." So I asked my mother in law, I said, "What do you cut the ends of the roast beef off for?" She says, "It gets brown on top, the juice comes out. That's the way my mother cooked it." I asked my mother in law's mother, who was still alive at the time, I said, "Do you remember when you cooked roast beef?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Why did you cut off the ends?" She says, "Oh, I could never get it in my pan."
Aha.
This family has been cooking roast beef for 40 years the same way, and the reason is long gone. We're the same way in government. We've been doing the same thing for 40 years, and the reason is long gone.
What was the original reason, do you think?
Well, people are not comfortable with making changes. They've got to see that they're better off because of the changes. And when you make these changes, you do what you're supposed to do, provide the best services we can. Especially in juvenile crime, we affect kids' lives for the rest of their life.
Do you think that rehabilitation is a real thing? Because some people say no, you can't rehabilitate criminals. We should just lock them up and throw away the key.
I think there's a difference between that question, between the juvenile system and the adult system. Certainly, with the juvenile system, we've seen it before, we can make a difference. With the adult system, they're already pretty well set in their ways, and they like what they do. They like getting up in the morning and going to crime just as you like going to work. A lot of them do. We could still make inroads with the adult, but we've got to measure what we do, and there's got to be follow up to look at the recidivism rate to see if they get arrested 3 to 5 years after they're let loose.
We're just quickly running our time down here. Let's pivot over to your book. So the book is called In Russia, a Brooklyn Solution. Have you written other, or I should say, have you published other novels, or is this your first?
This is my first novel. I wrote a book on criminal law and one on leadership. And it's funny how this book started. I was in law school and I got into an argument with one of the professors, which is pretty easy to do. And I said whether it was too late to teach ethics to people when they get into law school. And he said, I said, I've been teaching in college for 30 years. I could write a curriculum. He said, why don't you? And you'll satisfy the course requirements. So I wrote a curriculum on corruption and ethics for lawyers. So I submitted it, and about a month later, I got called down to the dean's office. Well, what the heck does the dean want with me? So I go see the dean, and she says, we love this curriculum. We're going to adopt it. I says, go ahead. You don't need my permission. She says, we'd like you to teach it. I said, you want me to teach it? I haven't graduated yet. I'm not a lawyer yet. She said, you're graduating in June. We're going to put you on the faculty in September. She says, which is the first time we've done that, student to professor. I says, I'm delighted. And so it made the front page of the New York Law Journal, and the Russians saw it and invited me down to the Russian embassy. I got permission from the dean to go down and meet with them. They wanted me to come over to Russia and teach this course, and they wanted to put a Russian attaché in my class. So I said, I'm sure it'll be okay with the dean. This is 1989, we were there. While I was there, I asked if they had any questions, any problems with serial crime, because serial crime was just coming around the corner to us. As a matter of fact, I taught the first course on serial crime at UF. It took me a long time to prepare that. Anyway, so they told me about this case in Rostov-on-Don, where they apprehended a fella that killed about 50 children over a 50-year period. It took them that long because Russian police don't have the skills to go after serial offenders. And it turned out to be the wrong guy. So when I left the embassy, that's where my book begins, with the execution of the wrong guy. And the fact that Russian authorities discovered they don't know how to investigate a crime like this. They reach out to the New York City Police Department to get an expert. And the police commissioner speaks to his chief of detectives. And he said, Chief, who's the best detective in your 4,500 man department? He says, I know I'm going to regret this. Lieutenant Anthony McGalley. He says, why? He says, because we're going to send him to Russia to help them solve a serial case. The chief looks at the commissioner and he goes, heaven help the Russians. And so Lieutenant McGalley goes to Russia. He uses his Brooklyn techniques, which got him some fame in Brooklyn. And in the writings, I talk about some cases that he had that are kind of funny and the things he went through to solve them. In one case, he took a floor out of a house and introduced it as evidence because he found skin on a floor. So that's the kind of character he is.
So this book is nonfiction then? I thought this was a fiction.
Well, it's fiction, but there's a lot of truth in it.
Okay, so it's based sort of loosely on this serial killer in Russia?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. How long did it take you to write the book? I know you said it started way back in 80s.
It started in 89, but I had to put it away. I went back because of the jobs I've had. I ran the New York City Correction Department. I had 14,000 officers, 5,000 civilians, 21,000 inmates. So that took every minute of my day. And the officers, by the way, gave me more problems than the inmates. And then I went to Tallahassee, and then I went to teaching. I've always loved teaching. I've always been in the classroom. So I always put the book down, went back to it, always had notes all over the place. I had to create 4 characters and a good plot. And I think it's a good plot. So far, the people who've read it really have some wonderful accolades, including the chief of homicide from Scotland Yard and an attache from the Russians. So they gave me wonderful endorsements.
So at the time that this case was, it was still the Soviet Union in Russia, right? Or it was just sort of disintegrating at that point?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So you didn't go over yourself, right?
No, I didn't. But I got a fellowship to the Harvard Russian Research Center, and I would go up to Boston and read some books and talk to some Russians. And then we had a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Odessa. There was several people that I had arrested years ago. I looked them up, and they were able to help me when I was in Brooklyn, when I was a detective in Brooklyn. So I got a lot of help on, I wanted the culture, I wanted to depict the culture to be as accurate as it could be.
So this book has been released now, right? It's out?
Yes,
Okay.
it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. All right. And I guess the last question before we wind this down is, do you have a website that you want to give out for the book, or a personal one? Or?
Yes, they told me I should have a website, so I had somebody help me do it. It's about me and some of the things I've done. If they're interested, AnthonySchembri.com. That's Anthony Schembri, SCHEMBRI.com. And the book is In Russia, A Brooklyn Solution.
Okay. How long has it been out? When was it released?
About a week.
Oh, about a week ago. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, interesting stories. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure meeting you, and best of luck. Are you going to write another one?
Well, the ending will make you think I will.
Oh, does it have a cliffhanger at the end?
Yeah, it's a heck of an ending.
All right. Well, Anthony, take care. Best of luck.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.